go. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show. I am, as always, your host, Rogan. We are here in the widescreen format on the nice fancy computer bought with the QK grant to read more H.P. Lovecraft. The next story in the book is one of my favorites. H.P. Lovecraft wanted very much to cross over from writing short stories to novels, much more lucrative market. He didn't really know how to step up to writing modern novels in terms of character development and structure. He wrote 3 short novels. He didn't even try to publish 2 of them. I don't remember which one he did publish. I think Mountains of Madness. This is one of the other 2, The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath. A deeply strange, relentlessly eccentric, eyebrow-raisingly psychedelic or proto-psychedelic piece of fantasy literature. It's a bit like Dunsany. It's not much like anything else. I'm not sure what the state of scholarship is in terms of how Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath is understood and appreciated. It's not exactly normal. And it's a long story. Like I said, it's a short novel. It's going to take much more than 1 stream to read. Probably 3, maybe 4. We'll see how much I get through here tonight. Thanks for being here. Nobody's here right now live, but of course people will watch this later. Thank you. The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath by Howard Phillips Lovecraft. 3 times Randolph Carter dreamed of the marvelous city, and 3 times was he snatched away while still he paused on the high terrace above it. All golden and lovely it blazed in the sunset, with walls, temples, colonnades, and arched bridges of veined marble, silver-basined fountains of prismatic spray, and broad squares and perfumed gardens, and wide streets marching between delicate trees and blossom-laden urns and ivory statues and gleaming rows, while on steep northward slopes climbed tiers of red roofs and old peaked gables harboring little lanes of grassy cobbles. It was a fever of the gods, a fanfare of supernal trumpets and a clash of immortal cymbals. Mystery hung about it as clouds about a fabulous unvisited mountain. And as Carter stood breathless and expectant on that balustraded parapet, there swept up to him the poignancy and suspense of almost vanished memory, the pain of lost things, and the maddening need to place again what once had an awesome and momentous place. He knew that for him its meaning must once have been supreme, though in what cycle or incarnation he had known it, or whether in dream or in waking, he could not tell. Vaguely it called up glimpses of a far, forgotten first youth, when wonder and pleasure lay in all the mystery of days, and dawn and dusk alike strode forth prophetic to the eager sound of lutes and song, unclosing fairy gates toward further and surprising marvels. But each night as he stood on that high marble terrace with the curious urns and carven rail and looked off over that hushed sunset, city of beauty and unearthly imminence, he felt the bondage of dreams' tyrannous gods, for in no wise could he leave that lofty spot, or descend the wide marmoreal flights flung endlessly down to where those streets of elder witchery lay outspread and beckoning. When for the 3rd time he awaked with those flights still undescended and those hushed sunset streets still untraversed, he prayed, long and earnestly, to the hidden gods of dream that brood capricious above the clouds on unknown Kadath, in the cold waste where no man treads. But the gods made no answer and showed no relenting, nor did they give any favoring sign when he prayed to them in dream, and invoked them sacrificially through the bearded priests Nasht and Kamatha, whose cavern temple with its pillar of flame lies not far from the gates of the waking world. It seemed, however, that his prayers must have been adversely heard, for after even the first of them he ceased wholly to behold the marvelous city, as if his 3 glimpses from afar had been mere accidents or oversights, and against some hidden plan or wish of the gods. At length, sick with longing for those glittering sunset streets and cryptical hill lanes among ancient tiled roofs, nor able, sleeping or waking, to drive them from his mind, Carter resolved to go with bold entreaty whither no man had gone before, and dare the icy deserts through the dark to where unknown Kadath, veiled in cloud and crowned with unimagined stars, holds secret and nocturnal the onyx castle of the great ones. In light slumber he descended the 70 steps to the cavern of flame, and talked of this design to the bearded priests noshed in common thaw. And the priests shook their pshent-bearing heads and vowed it would be the death of his soul. They pointed out that the great ones had shown already their wish, and that it is not agreeable to them to be harassed by insistent pleas. They reminded him, too, that not only had no man ever been to unknown Kadath, but no man had ever suspected in what part of space it may lie, whether it be in the dreamlands around our world, or in those surrounding some unguessed companion of Fomalhaut or Aldebaran. If in our dreamland it might conceivably be reached, but only 3 fully human souls since time began had ever crossed and recrossed the black impious gulfs to other dreamlands, and of that 3 2 had come back quite mad. There were, in such voyages, incalculable local dangers, as well as that shocking final peril which gibbers unmentionably outside the ordered universe where no dreams reach, that last amorphous blight of nethermost confusion which blasphemes and bubbles at the center of all infinity, the boundless demon sultan Azathoth, whose name no lips dare speak aloud. And who gnaws hungrily in inconceivable unlighted chambers beyond time amidst the muffled maddening beating of vile drums and the thin monotonous whine of accursed flutes, to which detestable pounding and piping dance slowly, awkwardly, and absurdly the gigantic ultimate gods, the blind, voiceless, tenebrous, mindless other gods whose soul and messenger is the crawling chaos Nyarlathotep. Hey, Turbo, what's up? Of these things was Carter warned by the priests noshed in common thaw in the cavern of flame, but still he resolved to find the gods on unknown Kadath in the cold waste, wherever that might be, and to win from them the sight and remembrance and shelter of the marvelous sunset city. He knew that his journey would be strange and long, and that the great ones would be against it. But being old in the land of dream, he counted on many useful memories and devices to aid him. So asking a farewell blessing of the priests and thinking shrewdly on his course, he boldly descended the 700 steps to the gate of deeper slumber and set out through the enchanted wood. In the tunnels of that twisted wood, whose low prodigious oaks twine groping boughs and shine dim with the phosphorescence of strange fungi, dwell the furtive and secretive Zoogs, who know many obscure secrets of the dream world and a few of the waking world, since the wood at 2 places touches the lands of men, though it would be disastrous to say where. Certain unexplained rumors, events, and vanishments occur among men where the Zoogs have access, and it is well that they cannot travel far outside the world of dream. But over the nearer parts of the dream world they pass freely, flitting small and brown and unseen, and bearing back piquant tales to beguile the hours around their hearths in the forests they love. Most of them live in burrows, but some inhabit the trunks of the great trees, and although they live mostly on fungi, it is muttered that they also have a slight taste for meat, either physical or spiritual, for certainly many dreamers have entered that wood who have not come out. Carter, however, had no fear, for he was an old dreamer and had learnt their fluttering language and made many a treaty with them, having found through their help the splendid city of Celephaeus in Uthnarge behind the Tanarian hills, where reigns half the year the great king Kuranes, a man he had known by another name in life. Kuranes was the one soul who had been to the Star Gulfs and returned free from madness. Hey, Sean, how are you? Threading now the low phosphorescent aisles between those gigantic trunks, Carter made fluttering sounds in the manner of the Zoogs and listened now and then for responses. He remembered one particular village of the creatures near the center of the wood, where a circle of great mossy stones in what was once a clearing tells of older and more terrible dwellers long forgotten, and toward this spot he hastened. He traced his way by the grotesque fungi, which always seem better nourished as one approaches the dread circle where elder beings danced and sacrificed. Finally, the greater light of those thicker fungi revealed a sinister green and gray vastness pushing up through the roof of the forest and out of sight. This was the nearest of the great ring of stones, and Carter knew he was close to the Zoog village. Renewing his fluttering sound, he waited patiently, and was at length rewarded by an impression of many eyes watching him. It was the Zoogs, for one sees their weird eyes long before one can discern their small, slippery brown outlines. Out they swarmed from hidden burrow and honeycombed tree, till the whole dim-litten region was alive with them. Some of the wilder ones brushed Carter unpleasantly, and one even nipped loathsomely at his ear, but these lawless spirits were soon restrained by their elders. The council of sages, recognizing the visitor, offered a gourd of fermented sap from a haunted tree, unlike the others, which had grown from a seed dropped down by someone on the moon. And as Carter drank it ceremoniously, a very strange colloquy began. The Zoogs did not, unfortunately, know where the peak of Kadath lies, nor could they even say whether the cold waste is in our dream world or in another. Rumors of the great ones came equally from all points, and one might only say that they were likelier to be seen on high mountain peaks than in valleys, since on such peaks they dance reminiscently when the moon is above and the clouds beneath. Then one very ancient Zoog recalled a thing unheard of by the others, and said that in Ulthar, beyond the river Skye, there still lingered the last copy of those inconceivably old Nakadic manuscripts made by waking men in forgotten boreal kingdoms and borne into the land of dreams when the hairy cannibal Nafkes overcame many-templed Alathoe and slew all the heroes of the land of Lomar. Those manuscripts, he said, told much of the gods, and besides, in Ulthar there were men who had seen the signs of the gods, and even one old priest who had scaled a great mountain to behold them dancing by moonlight. He had failed, though his companion had succeeded and perished namelessly. So Randolph Carter thanked the Zoogs, who fluttered amicably and gave him another gourd of moon tree wine to take with him, and set out through the phosphorescent wood for the other side, where the rushing Skye flows down from the slopes of Larion, and Hatheg and Ner and Ulthar dot the plain. Behind him, furtive and unseen, crept several of the curious Zoogs, for they wished to learn what might befall him, and bear back the legend to their people. The vast oaks grew thicker as he pushed on the village, and he looked sharply for a certain spot where they would thin somewhat, standing quite dead or dying among the unnaturally dense fungi and the rotting mold and mushy logs of their fallen brothers. There he would turn sharply aside, for at that spot a mighty slab of stone rests on the forest floor, and those who have dared approach it say that it bears an iron ring 3 feet wide. Remembering the archaic circle of great mossy rocks and what it was possibly set up for, the Zoogs do not pause near that expansive slab with its huge ring, for they realized that all which is forgotten need not necessarily be dead, and they would not like to see the slab rise slowly and deliberately. Carter detoured at the proper place and heard behind him the frightened fluttering of some of the more timid Zoogs. He had known they would follow him, so he was not disturbed, for one grows accustomed to the anomalies of these prying creatures. It was twilight when he came to the edge of the wood, and the strengthening glow told him it was the twilight of morning. Over fertile plains rolling down to the sky he saw the smoke of cottage chimneys, and on every hand were the hedges and ploughed fields and thatched roofs of a peaceful land. Once he stopped at a farmhouse well for a cup of water, and all the dogs barked affrightedly at the inconspicuous Zoogs that crept through the grass behind. At another house, where people were stirring, he asked questions about the gods and whether they danced often upon Larion. But the farmer and his wife would only make the elder sign and tell him the way to Nur and Ulthar. The elder sign? I guess that's it. I'm just trying to help. At noon he walked through the one broad high street of Nur, which he had once visited and which marked his farthest former travels in this direction, and soon afterward he came to the great stone bridge across the Skye, into whose central pier the masons had sealed a living human sacrifice when they built it 1,300 years before. Once on the other side, the frequent presence of cats, who all arched their backs at the trailing Zoogs, revealed the near neighborhood of Ulthar, for in Ulthar, according to an ancient and significant law, no man may kill a cat. Very pleasant were the suburbs of Ulthar, with their little green cottages and neatly fenced farms, and still pleasanter was the quaint town itself, with its old peaked roofs and overhanging upper stories and numberless chimney pots and narrow hill streets where one can see old cobbles whenever the graceful cats afford space enough. Carter, the cats being somewhat dispersed by the half-seen Zoogs, picked his way directly to the modest temple of the Elder Ones, where the priests and old records were said to be, and once within that venerable circular tower of ivied stone which crowns Althar's highest hill, he sought out the patriarch Atal, who had been up the forbidden peak Hatheg Kla in the stony desert and had come down again alive. I'm going to take another hit off this pipe, though reading this, frankly, makes you feel very high. Atal, seated on an ivory dais in a festooned shrine at the top of the temple, was fully 3 centuries old, but still very keen of mind and memory. From him Carter learned many things about the gods, but mainly that they are indeed only Earth's gods, ruling feebly our own dreamland and having no power or habitation elsewhere. They might, Atal said, heed a man's prayer if in good humor, but one must not think of climbing to their onyx stronghold atop Kadath in the cold waste. It was lucky that no man knew where Kadath towers, for the fruits of ascending it would be very grave. Atal's companion Barzeh the Wise had been drawn screaming into the sky for climbing merely the known peak of Hatheg Kla. With unknown Kadath, if ever found, matters would be much worse, for although Earth's gods may sometimes be surpassed by a wise mortal, they are protected by the other gods from outside, whom it is better not to discuss. At least twice in the world's history, the other gods set their seal upon Earth's primal granite. Once in antediluvian times, as guessed from a drawing in those parts of the Akkadic manuscripts too ancient to be read, and once on Hatheg Kla when Barzeh the Wise tried to see Earth's gods dancing by moonlight. So, Atal said, it would be much better to let all gods alone except in tactful prayers. Carter, though disappointed by Atal's discouraging advice and by the meager help to be found in the Akkadic manuscripts and the 7 cryptical books of Hassan, did not wholly despair. First he questioned the old priest about that marvelous sunset city seen from the railed terrace, thinking that perhaps he might find it without the god's aid, but Atal could tell him nothing. Probably, Atal said, the place belonged to his especial dream world, and not to the general land of vision that many know, and conceivably it might be on another planet. In that case, Earth's gods could not guide him if they would. But this was not likely, since the stopping of the dreams showed pretty clearly that it was something the Great Ones wished to hide from him. Then Carter did a wicked thing, offering his guileless host so many draughts of the moon wine which the Zoogs had given him that the old man became irresponsibly talkative. Robbed of his reserve, poor Atal babbled freely of forbidden things, telling of a great image reported by travelers as carved on the solid rock of the mountain Engranek on the Isle of Oriab in the southern sea, and hinting that it may be a likeness which Earth's gods once wrought of their own features in the days when they danced by moonlight on that mountain. And he hiccuped, likewise, that the features of that image are very strange, so that one might easily recognize them, and that they are signs of the authentic race of the gods. Now the use of all this in finding the gods became at once apparent to Carter. It is known that in disguise the younger among the great ones often espouse the daughters of men, so that around the borders of the cold waste wherein stands Kadath, the peasants must all bear their blood. This being so, the way to find that waste must be to see the stone face on Engranek and mark the features, then, having noted them with care, to search for such features among living men. Where they are plainest and thickest, there must the gods dwell nearest, and whatever stony waste lies back of the villages in that place must be that wherein stands Kadath. Much of the great ones might be learnt in such regions, and those with their blood might inherit little memories very useful to a seeker. They might not know their parentage, for the gods so dislike to be known among men that none can be found who has seen their faces wittingly, a thing which Carter realized even as he sought to scale Kadath. But they would have queer, lofty thoughts misunderstood by their fellows, and would sing of far places and gardens so unlike any known even in dreamland that common folk would call them fools. And from all this one could perhaps learn old secrets of Kadath, or gain hints of the marvelous sunset city which the gods held secret. And more, one might in certain cases seize some well-loved child of a god as hostage, or even capture some young god himself, disguised and dwelling amongst men with a comely peasant maiden as his bride. Seems rough. I mean, kidnapping, like really? I'm just trying to help, sorry. Atal, however, did not know how to find Engranek on its Isle of Oriab, and recommended that Carter follow the singing Skye under its bridges down to the southern sea, where no burgess of Ulthar has ever been, but whence the merchants come in boats or with long caravans of mules and two-wheeled carts. There is a great city there, Dilathlin, but in Ulthar its reputation is bad because of the black three-banked galleys that sail to it with rubies from no clearly named shore. The traders that come from those galleys to deal with the jewelers are human, or nearly so, but the rowers are never beheld, and it is not thought wholesome in Ulthar that merchants should trade with black ships from unknown places whose rowers cannot be exhibited. By the time he had given this information, Atal was very drowsy, and Carter laid him gently on a couch of inlaid ebony and gathered his long beard decorously on his chest. As he turned to go, he observed that no suppressed fluttering followed him, and wondered why the Zoogs had become so lax in their curious pursuit. Then he noticed all the sleek, complacent cats of Ulthar licking their chops with unusual gusto, and recalled the spitting and caterwauling he had faintly heard in lower parts of the temple while absorbed in the old priest's conversation. He recalled, too, the evilly hungry way in which an especially impudent young Zoog had regarded a small black kitten in the cobbled street outside. And because he loved nothing more on earth than small black kittens, he stooped and petted the sleek cats of Ulthar as they licked their chops, and did not mourn because those inquisitive Zoogs would escort him no farther. It was sunset now, so Carter stopped at an ancient inn on a steep little street overlooking the lower town. And as he went out on the balcony of his room and gazed down at the sea of red-tiled roofs and cobbled ways and the pleasant fields beyond, all mellow and magical in the slanted light, He swore that Ulthar would be a very likely place to dwell in always, were not the memory of a greater sunset city ever goading one on toward unknown perils. Then twilight fell, and the pink walls of the plastered gables turned violet and mystic, and little yellow lights floated up one by one from old lattice windows, and sweet bells pealed in the temple tower above, and the first star winked softly above the meadows across the sky. With the night came song, and Carter nodded as the lutanists praised ancient days from beyond the filigreed balconies and tessellated courts of simple Ulthar. And there might have been sweetness even in the voices of Ulthar's many cats, but that they were mostly heavy and silent from strange feasting. Some of them stole off to those cryptical realms which are known only to cats, and which villagers say are on the moon's dark side, whither the cats leap from tall housetops. But one small black kitten crept upstairs and sprang in Carter's lap to purr and play, and curled up near his feet when he lay down at last on the little couch whose pillows were stuffed with fragrant, drowsy herbs. In the morning, Carter joined a caravan of merchants bound for Dilathleen with the spun wool of Ulthar and the cabbages of Ulthar's busy farms. And for 6 days they rode with tinkling bells on the smooth road beside the Skye, stopping some nights at the inns of little quaint fishing towns, and on other nights camping under the stars while snatches of boatmen's songs came from the placid river. The country was very beautiful, with green hedges and groves, and picturesque peaked cottages and octagonal windmills. On the 7th day, a blur of smoke arose on the horizon ahead, and then the tall black tower of Dilathleen, which is mostly built of basalt. Dilathleen, with its thin, angular tower, looks in the distance like a bit of the Giant's Causeway, and its streets are dark and uninviting. There are many dismal sea taverns near the myriad wharves, and all the town is thronged with the strange seamen of every land on earth, and of a few which are said to be not on earth. Carter questioned the oddly robed men of that city about the peak of Engrenec on the Isle of Oriab, and found that they knew of it well. Ships came from Baharna on that island, one being due to return thither in only a month, and Engrenec is but 2 days' zebra ride from that port. But few had seen the stone face of the god, because it is on a very difficult side of Engrenec, which overlooks only sheer crags and a valley of sinister lava. Once the gods were angered with men on that side, and spoke of the matter to the other gods. It was hard to get this information from the traders and sailors in Dilathleen's sea taverns, because they mostly preferred to whisper of the black galleys. One of them was due in a week with rubies from its unknown shore, and the townsfolk dreaded to see it dock. The mouths of the men who came from it to trade were too wide. The way their turbans were humped up in 2 points above their foreheads was in especially bad taste, and their shoes were the shortest and queerest ever seen in the 6 kingdoms. But worst of all was the matter of the unseen rowers. Those 3 banks of oars moved too briskly and accurately and vigorously to be comfortable, and it was not right for a ship to stay in port for weeks while the merchants traded, yet to give no glimpse of its crew. It was not fair to the tavern keepers of Dilathleen, or to the grocers and butchers either, for not a scrap of provisions was ever sent aboard. The merchants took only gold and stout black slaves from Parg across the river. That was all they ever took, those unpleasantly featured merchants and their unseen rowers. Never anything from the butchers and grocers, but only gold and the fat black men of Parg whom they bought by the pound. And the odors from those galleys which the south wind blew in from the wharves are not to be described. Only by constantly smoking strong thagweed could even the hardiest denizen of the old sea taverns bear them. Dilathleen would never have tolerated the black galleys had such rubies been obtainable elsewhere, but no mine in all earth's dreamland was known to produce their like. Of these things Dilathleen's cosmopolitan folk chiefly gossiped whilst Carter waited patiently for the ship from Bahama, which might bear him to the isle whereon carven Engrenec towers lofty and barren. Meanwhile, he did not fail to seek through the haunts of far travellers for any tales they might have concerning Kadath and the cold waste, or a marvelous city of marble walls and silver fountains seen below terraces, in the sunset. Of these things, however, he learned nothing, though he once thought that a certain old slant-eyed merchant looked queerly intelligent when the cold waste was spoken of. This man was reputed to trade with the horrible stone villages on the icy desert plateau of Leng, which no healthy folk visit, and whose evil fires are seen at night from afar. He was even rumored to have dealt with that high priest, not to be described, which wears a yellow silken mask over its face and dwells all alone in a prehistoric stone monastery. That such a person might well have had nibbling traffic with such beings as may conceivably dwell in the cold waste was not to be doubted, but Carter soon found that it was no use questioning him. Then the black galley slipped into the harbor past the basalt mole and the tall lighthouse, silent and alien, and with a strange stench that the south wind drove into the town. Uneasiness rustled through the taverns along that waterfront, and after a while the dark, wide-mouthed merchants with humped turbans and short feet clumped stealthily ashore to seek the bazaars of the jewelers. Carter observed them closely and disliked them more the longer he looked at them. Then he saw them drive the stout black men of Parg up the gangplank, grunting and sweating, into that singular galley, and wondered in what lands, or if in any lands at all, those fat, pathetic creatures might be destined to serve. And on the third evening of that galley's stay, one of the uncomfortable merchants spoke to him, smirking sinfully and hinting of what he had heard in the taverns of Carter's quest. He appeared to have knowledge too secret for public telling, and though the sound of his voice was unbearably hateful, Carter felt that the lore of so far a traveler must not be overlooked. He bade him therefore be his own guest in locked chambers above, and drew out the last of the Zug's moon wine to loosen his tongue. The strange merchant drank heavily, but smirked unchanged by the draught. Then he drew forth a curious bottle with wine of his own, and Carter saw that the bottle was a single hollowed ruby, grotesquely carved in patterns too fabulous to be comprehended. He offered his wine to his host, and though Carter took only the least sip, he felt the dizziness of space and the fever of unimagined jungles. All the while the guest had been smiling more and more broadly, and as Carter slipped into blankness, the last thing he saw was that dark, odious face convulsed with evil laughter, and something quite unspeakable where one of the two frontal puffs of that orange turban had become disarranged with the shakings of that epileptic mirth. Carter next had consciousness of... You know what? I'm going to stop there, actually. That's, well, hold on. Yeah, I'm going to read 2 more pages. Carter next had consciousness amidst horrible odors beneath a tent-like awning on the deck of a ship, with the marvelous coasts of the southern sea flying by in unnatural swiftness. Hey, Nolan. He was not chained, but 3 of the dark sardonic merchants stood grinning nearby, and the sight of those humps in their turbans made him almost as faint as did the stench that filtered up through the sinister hatches. He saw slip past him the glorious lands and cities of which a fellow dreamer of earth, a lighthouse keeper in ancient Kingsport, had often discoursed in the old days, and recognized the templed terraces of Zar, abode of forgotten dreams, the spires of infamous Thalarion, that demon city of 1,000 wonders where the Eidolon Lathi reigns, the charnel gardens of Zura, land of pleasures unattained, and the twin headlands of crystal, meeting above in a resplendent arch, which guard the harbor of Sonanil, blessed land of fancy. Nolan, for the reading streams, I'm doing them in this format to keep the random chat separate from this, and this camera and microphone are better. But more people watch these reading streams later than come in here live. That's part of the point. Like it isn't like a huge ruckus of random stuff. I mean, I like the ruckus of random stuff, but it like that and the reading are sort of 2 different spaces. But yeah, I'm doing these over here. And it's like 3 people come in while I'm doing it, but then like the next day, 20 people watch it is how it's working out so far. This is only the 4th one I've done of these like this, I I think. Um, Past all these gorgeous lands, the malodorous ship flew unwholesomely, urged by the abnormal strokes of those unseen rowers below. And before the day was done, Carter saw that the steersman could have no other goal than the basalt pillars of the west, beyond which simple folk say splendid Cathuria lies, but which wise dreamers well know are the gates of a monstrous cataract, wherein the oceans of earth's dreamland drop wholly to abysmal nothingness and shoot through the empty spaces toward other worlds and other stars and the awful voids outside the ordered universe, where the demon Sultan Azathoth gnaws hungrily in chaos amid pounding and piping and the hellish dancing of the other gods, blind, voiceless, tenebrous, and mindless, with their soul and messenger Nyarlathotep. Meanwhile, the three sardonic merchants would give no word of their intent, though Carter well knew that they must be leagued with those who wished to hold him from his quest. It is understood in the land of dream that the other gods have many agents moving among men, and all these agents, whether wholly human or slightly less than human, are eager to work the will of those blind and mindless things in return for the favor of their hideous soul and messenger, the crawling chaos Nyarlathotep. So Carter inferred that the merchants of the humped turbans, hearing of his daring search for the Great Ones in their castle on Kadath, had decided to take him away and deliver him to Nyarlathotep for whatever nameless bounty might be offered for such a prize. What might be the land of those merchants, in our known universe or in the eldritch spaces outside, Carter could not guess, nor could he imagine at what hellish trysting place they would meet the crawling chaos to give him up and claim their reward. He knew, however, that no beings as nearly human as these would dare approach the ultimate knighted throne of the demon Azathoth in the formless central void. At the set of sun, the merchants licked their excessively wide lips and glared hungrily, and one of them went below and returned from some hidden and defensive cabin with a pot and basket of plates. Then they squatted close together beneath the awning and ate the smoking meat that was passed around. But when they gave Carter a portion, he found something very terrible in the size and shape of it, so that he turned even paler than before and cast that portion into the sea when no eye was on him. And again he thought of those unseen rowers beneath, and of the suspicious nourishment from which their far too mechanical strength was derived. It was dark when the galley passed betwixt the basalt pillars of the west, and the sound of the ultimate cataract swelled portentous from ahead. And the spray of that cataract rose to obscure the stars, and the deck grew damp, and the vessel reeled in the surging current of the brink. Then, with a queer whistle and plunge, the leap was taken, and Carter felt the terrors of nightmare as earth fell away, and the great boat shot silent and comet-like into planetary space. Oh, is Pywack in here? Well, come in, buddy. Yeah, what's up? Never before had he known what shapeless black things lurk and caper and flounder all through the ether, leering and grinning at such voyagers as may pass, and sometimes feeling about with slimy paws when some moving object excites their curiosity. These are the nameless larvae of the other gods, and like them are blind and without mind, and possessed of singular hungers and thirsts. Hold on, let me get some water. Hey, some dude. I'm waiting on the hotel room now. I talked to Jaisley. It's like a soft maybe. He's real busy. Um, Melissa's supposed to get back to me about the hotel room tonight or tomorrow was what I heard. So tomorrow. So I'll know what dates are for when I'm going. And then I'll get back in touch with Jaisley and ask him if he wants to do it. We'll see. Um, but that offensive galley did not aim as far as Carter had feared, for he soon saw that the helmsman was steering a course directly for the moon. The moon was a crescent, shining larger and larger as they approached it, and showing its singular craters and peaks uncomfortably. The ship made for the edge, and it soon became clear that its destination was that secret and mysterious side which is always turned away from the earth, and which no fully human person, save perhaps the dreamer Snurreth Ko, has ever beheld. The close aspect of the moon as the galley drew near proved very disturbing to Carter, and he did not like the size and shape of the ruins which crumbled here and there. The dead on the mountains were so placed that they could have glorified no wholesome or suitable gods, and in the symmetries of the broken columns there seemed to lurk some dark and inner meaning which did not invite solution. And what the structure and proportions of the olden worshippers could have been, Carter steadily refused to conjecture. Uh, some dude, Lovecraft, this was written in the 1920s, but when he was writing for Weird Tales, he and the other Weird Tales writers were intentionally doing this sort of old-fashioned neo-Gothic thing. It's in his time, it seemed old-fashioned. This is like Anne Rice in Interview with a Vampire doing this sort of timey, old school 19th century voice. Yeah, it's sort of feels like a fairy tale. Sort of feels, I don't know. The voice in this story is super strange. Everything about this story is super strange. I really don't know anything about the writing of it. I figured I would read some of it in here and then I would do some research. I've read it several times. It didn't used to be that the internet was there to tell you anything about the specific history of a story. I think this is one of those also, it used to be that Lovecraft fans and like scholars kind of ignored this one. I think because it's so fucking weird. Like it's really weird. Like I'm not sure there isn't anything else quite like this story. Um yeah, some dude the 1890 to 1930 is when the ideas that developed into modern horror all sort of start. So yeah, I was talking about this in the last stream. Jekyll and Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson and Dracula by Bram Stoker. Um, there's the Houseman's books, Aurobor and Labas. There's a bunch of classic ghost stories from that period too. It's the peak of the ghost story, the Edwardian ghost story. Edith Wharton, M.R. James. Um, Yeah, and the pulp writers that come up, they're all big fans of Algernon Blackwood. There's Machen, who was a member of the Golden Dawn with Crowley. His horror fiction is amazing. I might read some of that in here if I live long enough. Um, yeah, this is one of 3 novels Lovecraft wrote to try to break into the book market. I don't know who he thought would publish this. I don't know what he was thinking. Like, I really don't. Um, when the ship rounded the edge and sailed over those lands unseen by man, there appeared in the queer landscape certain signs of life, and Carter saw many low, broad, round cottages and fields of grotesque whitish fungi. He noticed that these cottages had no windows and thought that their shape suggested the huts of Eskimos. Then he glimpsed the oily waves of a sluggish sea and knew that the voyage was once more to be by water, or at least through some liquid. The galley struck the surface with a peculiar sound, and the odd elastic way the waves received it was very perplexing to Carter. They now slid along at great speed, once passing and hailing another galley of kindred form, but generally seeing nothing but that curious sea and a sky that was black and star-strewn, even though the sun shone scorchingly in it. There presently rose ahead the jagged hills of a leprous-looking coast, and Carter saw the thick, unpleasant gray towers of a city. The way they leaned and bent, the manner in which they were clustered, and the fact that they had no windows at all was very disturbing to the prisoner, and he bitterly mourned the folly which had made him sip the curious wine of that merchant with the humped turban. As the coast drew nearer and the hideous stench of that city grew stronger, he saw upon the jagged hills many forests, some of whose trees he recognized as akin to that solitary moon tree in the enchanted wood of earth, from whose sap the small brown zoogs ferment their peculiar wine. All right, I am actually going to stop reading there. I know when I've read enough, when I get slightly over oxygenated. It's like a heady sort of almost like hyperventilating feeling. Usually about 45 minutes, yeah. Thoughts on Dark Horse comics? Did I have EC comics growing up? Yeah, I love EC horror comics. I was obsessed with them when I was a kid. When I was a little kid, the horror comics that terrorized me were Creepy and Eerie and Vampirella, the Warren magazines. They were really intense and ran some really heavy R-rated stuff. I don't. The Dark Horse. So did Dark Horse do a series based on Unknown Kadath? Because I looked up. I searched Google Images just now for the Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath by Lovecraft to grab some art to take a picture of for a thumbnail, and then I decided not to because I saw there had been a recent comic book series, and I was like, I don't want to steal somebody's art if they're alive and making money on it. So, shock suspense stories, yeah. Shock suspense stories and crime suspense stories are great. Yeah, I've thought about. I haven't. One of my ideas for an unproduced movie is to write an anthology script based on the men's stories, like the war and combat and adventure stories, Frontline Combat and Two Fisted Tales, and some of the stories from crime suspense stories and shock suspense stories. But and been writing movies lately. Yeah, I love those comic books, and the Warren magazines too. Yeah, they're great. Master Race from Impact #1 is just the fucking best. One of the best comic books ever written. Harvey Kurtzman. Harvey Kurtzman's art. It's so weird that Harvey Kurtzman was like the one before they had to switch it. Like if anybody doesn't know, EC Comics had a they had an extensive line of horror and science fiction and crime comics that were for adults. They really were not pitched at children at all, and they were forced by the congressional hearings that led to the Comics Code Authority to cancel all those. So they were covered by launching Mad magazine, the humor comic. Harvey Kurtzman was the funniest artist, but before Mad magazine, he was the scariest artist. Like his war stories and crime stories are the roughest. Master Race is so fucking intense. Were the OG comics still cheap in the 80s? There weren't. No, in the 80s, the EC comics, those color reprints of the EC comics that are basically standalones of like every single comic they ever published, those didn't exist till the 90s. They were really hard to. Yeah, I did not grow up on the EC comics. I didn't get to read them until I was an adult because they were so hard to put your hands on in the 80s and 70s. They had those black and white hardback collections, and you could buy those out of the back of comic books. There were ads for them, and they were expensive. I never had the money for them. You got the reprints in your early 20s. Yeah, me too. They were doing the reprints. The reprints were out on newsstands in 92. Because I remember having this weird moment, like in the days when we were doing My Band Wrong, and we were taking a lot of acid. Those that I bought Tales from the Crypt #1, a reprint of it off the newsstand at like the convenience store by campus at University of Southern Mississippi in Hattiesburg. It was like it laid around on the coffee table at Wrong House for a while, and then I bought a couple more because they were reprinting all of them, like all the EC comics. Yeah, if I ever start reading comic books again, I'm going to be buying all those again. I don't know if I can really read comic books now. It's just depressing since I lost all my comic books. All right, guys. I'm having trouble breathing. I don't know what's wrong with me. The Falcon and the Snowman starring Stanley and Roman Marshall. All right, yeah. I'm gonna go catch my breath and eat some. I need a very late dinner, and they were $8 in downtown Chicago. Imagine they were like 99 cents then. The newsstand ones in the early '90s. I don't remember. They were a couple bucks. Yeah, I don't remember. I don't remember them being remarkably expensive. Uh, yeah, they were cheaper than you would think for that kind of specialty comic book. It's cool. Um, they did reprints of Mad magazines too that were on the newsstands, or they do probably still do off and on. Um, all right, I will see you guys tonight. I am yeah. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go eat something. I'm gonna go get some sleep. I'm gonna go catch up on the movies a little bit. I'm gonna yeah. I'm watching 30s horror movies. I don't know what the next movie on my list is. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks, some dude. Nolan. Bazooka Joe comics. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks, guys.